coming up. Got my sidekick with me. Are you getting in today? Yeah? I was recently reading an email from the director for Wycliffe's partner organisation in French-speaking Africa, and he referenced this passage that we just read, and in particular verse 12, in which Aaron and Hur hold up Moses' arms. In our work in Senegal, we're seeking to work alongside the churches to enable people to be transformed by God's word in the language that they value most. And as we do that, each of you here in this congregation are holding us up. Since we travelled back to Senegal 2 years ago, a lot has happened. And one of the big things that I think most of you know about was Seba needing emergency back surgery. He had 2 slip discs, which were causing severe nerve compression, and he was more or less paralysed from the waist down. After sending results from a CT scan to a British doctor that we know in Senegal, she referred us to an Australian doctor who happens to work a couple of days a week in the town that we live in, and she was there in the hospital in that town that day. So we were sent to her for an ultrasound, and she told us to pack our bags and to go straight to the capital city to see a neurosurgeon. This was a pretty steep learning curve for me. I'd never driven in Senegal before. We'd owned a car for about a year by then, and I kept saying, yeah, someday I'll get round to driving here, because it's a wee bit different from driving in Belfast. But I hadn't ever got round to it, so it was a bit of a baptism of fire, but we survived. I also had had very little experience of the Senegalese hospital system. For example, once Seba was admitted, we had to go to the hospital shop and buy sheets for his bed, because literally nothing is provided there. But thankfully, we had many people who were around us who were holding up our arms. A colleague and a cousin were both staying in our house at the time, and so we could leave Francis with them while we rushed off to the capital city. We had a friend from Ziguinchor, a very close friend of Seba's, flew up from the south of the country on the day of the operation, and he was able to drop everything and come and spend the night at the hospital with Seba for a few nights, because with Adele, I wasn't able to stay over. She wasn't even really meant to come in, although we snuck her in a few times. And a few other times, colleagues were able to sit outside with her. So we're so thankful for just all of these people that were around us, were holding us up through that time. We even discovered that almost our next door neighbour was a physiotherapist. So once Seba was out of hospital, he was able to come 6 days a week, and he still comes once a week now. From a distance, I know too that many of you were praying. Many of you sent us words of encouragement. And this was also a great support to us and a way of holding up our arms. And I want to say thank you for that. Seba is now much improved, as you'll see the week after next. He still can't go for a miles and mile long walk, but he can walk short distances. He's still working a bit on his balance, but he continues to see progress, and he can drive, he can do daily life. Beyond our hospital experience, as a congregation, you've also been holding up my arms for the past 10 years. This February past marked 10 years since I went to Senegal, which is hard to believe. And without your prayers, without your encouragement, without your financial support, we wouldn't be able to be there and to be carrying out this work. It may seem small, but as Moses needed Aaron and Hur to hold up his arms, we need each one of you holding us up. And then to talk a little bit about what is that work, what are we doing there? We're not just in Senegal to get the Bible translated. We're not just there to produce a book and have a book to put on the shelves. We want to be supporting the church. Senegal is something like 95% Muslim, 4% Catholic, and 1% Protestant. And in all of those 3 categories, there's also a lot of traditional religion mixed in. So we want to provide the church with resources in languages that they understand, in languages that will really speak to their hearts. We want to provide them with training in how to use those resources. We currently have two translation teams based in the town of Chess, where we now live. This is one of them, the Clare Orr translation team. And just a week before Seba's operation, we moved into our new purpose-built offices in the town of Chess. This is a picture of them. It may not look very green to you, but given that this is the Sahel, just below the Sahara Desert, it's a very dry and dusty town, so everybody that comes into our offices says, wow, this is like a little bit of paradise, a little bit of green paradise here in Chess. So we're very blessed to be able to go there every day to go to work. There were still a lot of little jobs that needed to be finished up, even once we moved in, and even this month there have been some plumbing issues being sorted out. The other day I showed my parents a photo that I just received on my phone, and I said, this wouldn't be very exciting to anyone else, but it shows that the plumbing system is now working, so I was excited by it. Seba has taken on the role of office manager, so he's responsible for making sure that things are running smoothly, making sure that the translation teams are able to work well in the offices. The picture of the translation team that was up before is a team that's been working for more than 10 years, and this team is a team that have just come to the end of their first 3 years of translating. They are using a new method, focusing much more on orality. In Senegalese societies, stories are passed on from one generation to another by people telling stories, not by people writing them down and reading them. People don't really grow up surrounded by books and reading in the same way they do here. It's quite rare that you would go into somebody's house and see a bookshelf full of books, whereas here that's pretty common. Even children's books, we have a bookshelf full of books for the children in both French and English, but that's very rare to see. Even those who have been to school often prefer listening to things than reading, just because that's their culture, that's how they've been brought up. And therefore, an oral Bible translation approach has been developed that allows the translators to listen to the Bible passages, to internalize the story, to remember the story, not to memorize it word for word, but to remember the sense, the meaning of the story, and then they speak aloud a translation and record it. This recorded translation then goes through all the same steps that a written Bible translation goes to make sure that it's faithful, to make sure that it's accurate, to make sure that it's natural. It's discussed and refined within this team of translators. There's input from someone who has biblical training. It's tested within the community to make sure it's understood by other people, to make sure it's natural, and then it's checked by an expert consultant to make sure that it is biblically accurate. Once the final version is agreed on, that's recorded, and it's released within a smartphone app. This is the first app that team have produced, which has passages about the Son of Man, and it will also be published as a printed book, and that will be used in certain contexts, but we expect the app to be used much more widely, and it's really an advantage of an app that you can have the audio as well as the text. The Bible has actually already been translated into Wolof, the whole Bible, and is going to be published very soon. The New Testament was published many years ago, but that translation, which is known as the regional translation, is more appropriate to people who've grown up in Wolof villages and who are ethnically Wolof, whereas Wolof is now spoken across the whole country, in the towns, in the cities, and it's a bit mixed with French. And that regional Wolof translation is more difficult to understand for people who have grown up speaking Wolof, but a different dialect, we could say, of Wolof. And therefore, this oral translation, it's using more contemporary language, and we're hoping it will be more easily understood in the towns and cities. In my project management role, I'm not involved day to day in the work of translation, but I'm involved with helping these projects plan their activities and then making sure that they're sticking to their plans. This is Adele's friend, Tata Liz, beside me here. The American in the picture. Is that Tata Liz?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the other two are two of our Senegalese colleagues. So I'm also responsible for putting together funding proposal requests for our translation teams. And they usually have to be renewed every 2 or 3 years. So just before coming back to Northern Ireland, we were working on renewing the contemporary Wolof funding proposal. And I help the teams if they need to be put in touch with an expert in one area or another, or if they need advice on other things. I might not be able to give them the advice, but I know where to find the right people who can. As I mentioned to the children, Senegal has over 30 languages, but so far there are only about a dozen or so New Testament translations, and only a couple of those languages have the full Bible. So we're also looking to see what are the languages that still need work. Some of those languages, either they're very small and they're dying out, or else the people who speak them all speak fluent Wolof as well, because Wolof is so widespread. So there's not necessarily a need for a Bible in every single one of those 30 languages, but we want to make sure that the languages where there is a need, that we can make it available. We've got old data about those languages, but it's mostly 30 or so years old, and so we're hoping to get some more up-to-date data. Since moving to Chess 2 years ago, Saba and I have also been visiting the different organizations that are also present in Chess, visiting different churches, finding out what we can do. Are there ways that we can be working better together? We don't want to be off in our corner translating the Bible, because the Bible is only useful if it's going to be used. And so we need to be working alongside churches and others to ensure it will be used. Getting to know others in town has even included holding a few ceilidhs on the roof of our conference room and sharing a bit of our Northern Irish culture. Within the organisation we work for, there are actually 3 Northern Irish people, so we've got a good base to start off for ceilidhs. And as we work together with churches, we want to be supporting them in their ministries. Roughly 50% of the population of Senegal is under the age of 20. That's another way in which it's a little bit different from the UK. And so churches are wanting to be able to better reach this age group of under 20s. And one way we hope to be able to support them in doing that is through a Sunday school program, which was developed by colleagues in Cameroon and then adapted by Mali, which is our neighbour, and has a lot of similarities culturally. And so we're going to start off by using it in French in a few churches in the town we live in. And then we hope that will start in October. Seba will be heading it up. And then we hope the following year to translate it into Wolof and a couple of other languages and use it more widely. Personally, I'm really looking forward to that, because currently Sunday school is very variable. It depends who's taking it. Some weeks it's great. Some weeks it's, here's a colouring sheet for 45 minutes, and that's all there is to it. So we hope that this program can encourage churches to reach the young people and just provide more resources for them. It can be hard for us to imagine. I don't even remember how many English Bible translations we have. Who knows how many different Sunday school programs exist, different Bible study programs, prayer guides. We've got so many things available to us in English. But for many of these Senegalese languages, nothing exists in those languages. And so we want to be helping the church by making those resources available to them. So I hope this has given you a better idea of what we've been doing for the past 2 years since our last visit. Thank you once again for your partnership in prayer, financially, and keeping in touch with us. If you don't already get our newsletter and you'd like to, you can let me know. And I just want to mention too, we're hoping to organise a Senegalese meal while we're here. So I think that will be on the 14th of August, just before we go back to Senegal. So it'll be in the announcements in future weeks, I'm sure. But please, if you'd like to come, do let us know so that we have an idea how many people we'll be cooking for. And I think there's a video now about Wycliffe. Thank you for your patience with Adele as well.